So I'd say that's enough theory for now. Let's get started with React Native and let's create a new React Native project. And to get started, you can simply search for React Native and you should find the official web page, reactnative.dev. And on that page, you can then of course learn more about React Native, and it therefore is a great resource to use in addition to this course, also to dive deeper. But you can also use this site to get started and to create new React Native projects, and that is what we'll do here. So if you click on Get Started, you should be taken to this Setting Up the Development Environment page here. If you're not, you can visit it manually by navigating to it here on the sidebar on the left. And on this page, you'll find two main approaches you can use for creating new React Native projects. And the approach that is selected by default, and that's therefore recommended also by me, is to use a tool called Expo, and to use its CLI, its command line interface, to create new projects in the end and to manage these projects. Alternatively, you could also use a tool called the React Native CLI, which you could also use to create React Native projects. But as you'll also see in this course, this Expo tool simply makes the process of creating and managing and building React Native apps a lot easier. That's why we will also use this approach in this course, just as it's essentially recommended on the official page here. But what's the difference between these two approaches? Why do we have two approaches? We have the Expo CLI and the React Native CLI. CLI stands for Command Line Interface, and both tools are tools that exist in order to help you create React Native projects and run React Native apps on testing devices and simulators, as well as build React Native apps so that you can ship them to the app stores. So these are the tools you need to really build apps and to get those packages, those distributable packages, which you can upload to the app stores. These two tools are crucial. But you don't need to use them both. You can use either of the two, and one tool is enough. But why do we have these two tools, and what's the difference? Well, the Expo CLI, or just Expo, as I will also call it throughout the course, and the company behind this CLI, is in the end a third-party service that you can use. A service that is entirely free. You don't have to sign up, you don't have to pay for it. You can sign up and you can pay. They do offer extra paid services, but to build React Native apps and to ship them, you don't need to pay. When using Expo, the CLI, and a couple of other free tools which they give you, you get a managed app development workflow, as I like to call it, which means creating projects is easy, writing code is a bit easier, tapping into native device functionalities like using the device camera and so on is easier. And in general, when using Expo, the Expo CLI, and also a couple of other tools provided by Expo, writing native apps with React Native is more convenient than with just the React Native CLI and without Expo. There is less friction to this process. And the best thing is that you can still leave this Expo approach and ecosystem anytime if you need to. If you start by using Expo because it's easier to get started with that, and then at a later point you find out that you want to switch to just using the React Native CLI workflow and not using Expo, you can do this anytime. That's why it's also the default selection to start with Expo, because it's easier and you can still switch anytime you want to. Now, why do we have the React Native CLI then? Well, because it existed before we had Expo, because this is the tool provided by the React Native team and the community around React Native. It gives you a bare bone React Native development setup. which means you will need to do more configuration and setup work on your own. There are less convenience features, and if you need to tap into certain native device features like using the camera or other features, then it is often a bit more work when not having Expo around. Because, as mentioned before, Expo is not just about the tool that creates projects, it will also give you helpful packages and tools that you can use when writing code that will make your life easier in that case as well. Now, what the pure React Native workflow does have, though, is that it is often a bit easier to integrate with native source code. So, with source code written in Java or Objective-C or Swift or Kotlin. So, if you must mix JavaScript code and native device source code, then using just the React Native CLI could be beneficial. But the idea behind React Native is that you don't have to do this too often, and therefore this might not really be an advantage. And for all these reasons, and especially since you can switch anytime if you need to, we will use Expo in this course. As you will see, it's super easy to get started with that, and it will make building React Native apps much easier.